Novel Navigator. Chapter 21, The Second Lesson. A few days had passed since the start of the tutorial. The door to the second floor was still tightly closed, and most of the players began wondering whether the group that entered the tutorial before them had encountered some kind of problem. At this moment, in the cafeteria of the mall, several people talked while stuffing their mouths with the delicious food. Yesterday, I saw Donald talking to one of the players who had already passed the second floor. A player said while taking a bite of his food. I assume he tried to fish some information about the next floor. Wait, you can do that? Another player asked in surprise. I don't see why not. The player said. However, they aren't apparently giving the information for free. You would have to pay shine coins for that information. ACH. Shine coins are important, so no wonder that they aren't giving information for free. The player said. However, can any of us even afford it? Yet. The other player sighed. I checked the price for weapons and skills. They are ridiculously expensive. I only got 3 shine coins for all the stuff I managed to gather, and I almost died for those. Yet, that Flamekeeper merchant is very hard-headed. The player sighed. No matter what I said, he just didn't want to listen. PSST, he is here. The third person on the table whispered and nudged his chin to point at the person who entered the cafeteria. The person was a black-haired young man with a pale-skinned face and navy blue eyes. His build was rather lean, and one wouldn't think he was strong at first glance, but none of them seemed to underestimate him. Adam. The player whispered. He must have some information about the second floor, right? Why do you think so? He seemed to know where the boss of the first floor was hiding. The player said. I think he had received some information beforehand about the tutorial. That's cheating, isn't it? Ron and Dakota didn't seem to forbid it. The player shrugged his shoulders. However, he is still powerful and seems to have a background in martial arts. Perhaps one of his family members is already a mercenary and has trained him. Yet, he managed to fight Ramon and his group alone. The third player shuddered. I wouldn't want to fight them. They look like they are part of some gang in the real world. Right, real world. The player laughed. It's been around 3 days since we came here. Anyone waiting for you when you get out? No one for me. Neither for me. The player nodded. Easier that way. I had to convince my parents, which wasn't easy. They were afraid of my safety, or some shit like that. Yet, for a good reason too. The other player scratched the back of his head. This place isn't what I expected. Is this even a game? I feel like we are in a different world. Yet. At that moment, a holographic screen appeared on the cafeteria wall. The screen showed the face of Dakota. This was a holographic device that allowed people to talk. It was the only way of speaking from long distances in real time. Other ways of communicating were via letters, but they were way slower. The second lesson begins now, come to the auditorium. Dakota's echoing voice traversed throughout the mall. Without further ado, the group that had Dakota as a teacher stopped whatever they were doing and started moving towards the auditorium. The other players didn't move an inch and continued to do their own stuff as they had different teachers, and thus this lesson didn't concern them as they had already gone through the second lesson. After taking seats in the auditorium, Dakota appeared from the front of the auditorium with the same book in hand as before. She stopped in the middle of the stage and opened her mouth. Welcome to the second lesson. Today's lesson, Chaos Beings and New World. The players listened silently. However, there were a few players missing, more noticeable Ramon and Hannibal, as they didn't bother to come for some lessons. Seth took out his notepad and pencil to take notes. Adam sat in the back row, even though he was more aware of the things than Dakota was most likely. He had, after all, 13 years of memories from the future, and some things in the current timeline hadn't even been discovered yet. Yet, he still came to the lesson believing that even a small thing like this would increase his final point score. He also didn't have anything else to do other than train. Chaos beings, as we call them, are the creatures you encountered on the first floor. Dakota began the lesson. The chaos beings are unpredictable and strange creatures. They can adapt to their environment and use everything around them to their advantage while battling the mercenaries. They are the main enemy of mercenaries. It is our duty to protect the human sanctuary from them. While dungeons are full of them, it's not their only place of existence. Beyond the dungeon, there is the New World. It is an enormous place surrounded by tall rock walls, and it surrounds our place of existence. It's called the Wall of the Living. The Wall of the Living circles us, it is what protects us from the horrors of the wasteland. Inside the wall, there are 5 cities named Dawnwatch, Driftwood, New Karma, Ebon Reach, and Imperium City. There are also countless villages and towns. That is what is inside the Wall of the Living and where mercenaries live alongside originals. However, on the other side of the Wall of the Living, there is the Wasteland. It is a god-forsaken land where chaos beings roam freely. That's where most mercenaries die, but it is still a place of enormous wealth and a way of gaining strength. That's why mercenaries still roam out there in search of treasures. You might think of chaos beings as mindless robots, but that is not true. The stronger chaos being is, the more intelligent and trickier they are. Never underestimate them. The chaos beings you encountered on the first floor were also at the bottom of the hierarchy among chaos beings. We also have reason to believe that chaos beings are pretty much like us, with their own ruler and hierarchy. At the back of the auditorium, Adam crossed his arms and thought. That's a rumor that is famous even in the future. There have been strange occurrences where powerful mercenaries disappear when they venture too far into the wasteland. The strange part is that they don't appear back in the real world. Even after their disappearance, they are still inside the game, slowly withering away till they die, and their loved ones cannot do anything about it. That was big news in the future, and parents used it to scare their children to stop them from playing. It is not such a big news in the current timeline, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening even now. Ding, ding. At that moment, a holographic screen appeared on the screen of the auditorium, right behind Dakota. Dakota turned around with a raised eyebrow and saw Ron's face on the large holographic screen. The second floor is now open. Ron's voice echoed, and then the holographic screen disappeared. The players' jaws dropped in shock, as they didn't expect it to open so suddenly. Well then. Dakota wryly smiled and turned to look at the players. The class has been concluded. Remember to check the mission board, there are missions for the second floor that will give extra points. Good luck! Without further ado, the players hurried out of the auditorium, pushing other players out of their way. Only one person walked at casual speed, and that was Adam. So it's finally time. Adam thought and rubbed his neck. Good, I was getting bored. I have already decided on what mission I will undertake. It'll be quite interesting. Chapter 22, Adult Centipede Skeleton. A door stood at the end of the first floor of the mall. An otherworldly light seeped underneath it and brightened the area around it. At this moment, it unlocked with a gentle click, and immediately afterwards, players rushed through it like a stampede of animals. They were eager and nervous to enter the second floor. The ones who didn't do very well on the first floor were desperate to do well on the second floor. At the mission board, most of the missions belonging to the second floor were already taken, only the remaining few were left. Adam looked at the mission board, saw the last remaining second floor missions, and looked uninterested. However, he was very interested in one of the missions on the top of the board, which was ignored by other players. These missions are called all missions, and can be completed on any floor. Adam took one of the mission posters and looked at it with a thoughtful smile. Mission: find and destroy the baby centipede skeleton. Rank: F. Floor: any. Description: a race of chaos beings that often live in dark, damp basement areas. They can often be found on any floor, as they are one of the most common chaos beings found in the dungeon. Reward: 5,000 points. F-ranked mission. Adam folded the poster and stuffed it inside his pocket. It's not the hardest mission available, but for coin feeders, F-ranked missions can be extremely deadly. However, I don't care about the baby centipede skeleton itself. Instead, it's what follows and why Dean's discovery was so shocking and crucial. He nodded and then headed towards the door to the second floor. It was wide open, and he couldn't see anything except bright light. After Adam stepped through the door, his figure disappeared amid the light and vanished from the safe area. On the second floor of the mall, Muriel took out her notepad and scribbled something down. "What mission did your player take?" A voice came behind her. Muriel turned to her side and saw Ron lean on the railing, looking down towards the door of the second floor. "F-ranked, all mission," Muriel replied. "An ordinary find and destroy chaos being mission." "Oh." Ron rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I expected him to take some risks. Ramon and Hannibal took the D-ranked mission. I suppose he is not as reckless as we thought," Muriel said and closed her notepad. "He has gained enough points to get at least a D-rank score. If that's all he gets, I will be disappointed in him," Ron said with his arms crossed. "Mercenary also has to be bold. Does he still lack courage?" Muriel shook her head. "I don't know." However, she couldn't get the words Adam spoke to her a few days ago. She had a hunch that Adam wouldn't be afraid of taking a D-ranked mission. Is he only concentrating on the boss fights and is trying to save his strength? Muriel frowned deeply. After Adam opened his eyes, a dark land opened up in front of him. The sky was dark and cloudy, as if it could start raining at any moment, and he was standing at the entrance of an abandoned town with buildings made of black rocks with shattered windows and crumbling walls. Adam looked at the ground below his feet, which was cracked like desert soil and very dry. After looking away from the ground, he saw a black castle at the end of the town, standing on top of a small hill, surrounded by black rock walls and 4 watchtowers, one of which was broken from the middle. The players were running towards the black castle as if it were a race to see who could reach that place first. They all expected the boss to be there. Adam looked away from the black castle and walked into a dimly lit alleyway with his hands slipping inside his pockets. He was hoping for Dean's memory to serve him correctly. After one raid, they had gathered around a campfire, and the generals of Star faction spoke about their tutorial experiences. Dean's experience stood out the most, as he was the one that almost caused the destruction of his entire group. However, he acted very valiantly, and at the end of the tutorial, he became the 8th person ever to receive an S-ranked score. After a short walk later, Adam stopped in front of a gated building with shattered windows and a dark interior. It was in a quite isolated place, far from the town's main street and from the Black Castle. It looked like this building hadn't been touched for many centuries. Adam opened the black, creaking gate and walked to the front door. After opening the door, he entered the room and heard the creaking floor below him. As he navigated through the first floor, he soon found a door hidden behind fallen furniture. After moving the furniture away and opening the door, he saw stairs leading deep into the basement. Adam walked down the stairs and reached the basement soon afterward. It was a very dark place, with damp air and a musty smell. It seemed like the perfect spot for baby centipede skeleton to live. However, when Adam's eyes got used to the darkness, he didn't see the centipede anywhere. But then Adam slowly drew his short sword and approached the cracked wall at the end of the basement. It looked like it had been punched really hard and was about to collapse. He took a deep breath and put the shield in front of his body, then tackled the wall with all his might. Crash! The wall crumbled apart, and dust clouds filled the air. At that moment, a chilly breeze swept through the basement, and the clicking sound echoed throughout the room, as if there were hundreds of locks disengaging at the same time. Adam took out a torch and matchstick, which he purchased from a merchant store, and lit up the torch. As the torch lit up the small area around him, he then hurled it through the broken wall and into the vast darkness beyond. As the torch illuminated the darkness, its yellowish light revealed a creepy skeleton nearly 30 meters long and 5 meters high. The skeleton had over 100 legs, all sharp and deadly. At the moment when the torch landed on the ground shook like an earthquake had struck the town, and then the skeleton turned towards the crumpled wall in the distance, and even though it couldn't see, it could sense a nearby presence. If this sight were seen by Ron and others, their faces would pale, as this creature wasn't baby centipede skeleton. Instead, it was a nearly mature adult centipede skeleton. When it was discovered by Dean 5 years later, it was fully mature and had caused enormous amounts of damage throughout the second floor, killing most of the players. It was too much for coin feeders to deal with, and thus, some mercenaries working in the safe area had to step in and kill the centipede. It was one of the rare instances when they had to actually intervene. Ha! Adam's face paled with a twitching lip. Didn't those so-called chaos being experts say that one of the baby centipede skeletons must have had some kind of surprise evolution, starting in 2150 and lasting 5 years? The evolution should have started this year, and yet, it looks like he has been evolving for a few years at least. Chaos being experts, my fucking ass. Smash! The centipede skeleton stabbed the ground with one of its legs that had a length of 4 to 5 meters. That single leg had more strength than a harpoon, and it could easily pierce through any metal. Adam slowly started backing off, feeling slightly regretful that he believed those fools who called themselves as chaos being experts. At that moment, the centipede skeleton shot forward, its 100 legs moving in unison as it lunged towards Adam. Adam quickly ran up the stairs, stormed out of the basement, and jumped out of the window like a rabbit escaping its predator. At that moment, the building behind him crumbled like a house of cards, and then the centipede skeleton jumped out of the ground, its disgusting body and long, spindly legs stretching out towards the sky. Shit! Adam jumped to his feet, moved the shield in front of him, and put the shield into a counter-attack stance. There was no time for regrets. It's still not as strong as it will be in 5 years, but can I defeat it as coin feeder? Adam closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then slammed his eyes open with renewed vigor in his eyes. Fuck it, I'll try. Chapter 23, Strong Force. Beep, beep, beep. Alarms rang in the mall's control room. Several holographic screens showed several scenes from different floors, but now the biggest screen showed the skeleton-bodied centipede wreaking havoc with its springy skeleton legs. The door slammed open, and Ron trotted inside with a deep frown. What the hell is going on? Following him, Muriel also stepped inside the room with a bunch of documents in her hands. There were other handlers also gathered in the room, all like her, female originals. Sir, it seems like there has been adult centipede skeleton hiding who knows how long under the second floor's dark town. One of the people in the room exclaimed. Ron looked at the large screen with wide eyes. God almighty, are there any players nearby? Yes, a player had most likely interrupted the adult centipede skeleton's evolution slumber. The screen shifted, showing a black-haired player standing near the centipede with a shield and sword in hand. Muriel's eyes widened in shock, and she turned back to her notes. He went after baby centipede skeleton, but it was actually a mature version. Her heart started racing. He is in trouble. Cursed. Ron looked at one of the people who operated the control room. Message the Council of Mercenaries. I'll have to take action. Why, you can't possibly interrupt with the tutorial. One person argued. This is something that those players have to deal with. Mercenaries have to deal with difficult situations all the time, this is nothing different. It is different when a fully mature adult centipede skeleton can destroy the hierarchy of the dungeon. Ron shouted angrily. This doesn't only affect the tutorial. This can affect everyone below floor 20, and who knows how many mercenaries will die if this threat isn't taken care of. Ugh. The control room workers groaned as they couldn't find words to refute Ron. I'll go. The Council of Mercenaries can punish me if they wish so. Ron turned around to leave the control room. At that moment, a loud shout interrupted him. That player is attacking it. Ron spun his head around, and his eyes widened in shock. What is this fool doing? Ron, you'll have to hurry. Muriel shouted. Arg! Ron stomped out of the room and leaped down from the third floor straight to the bottom floor. Crack! As he crashed on the bottom of the mall, the ground cracked and shattered beneath him. At that moment, silver armor with large shoulder pads, embroidered with the crest of a serpent coiled around a crescent moon, hugged his muscular frame, and on his back, a large shield with the same crest was strapped. At Ron's hand, a large sword manifested out of nowhere, and he held it with a tight grip. Ron's face was then covered by a silver serpent helmet, and without further ado, he stepped through the glowing door. Arg! Adam held the shield in front of him as the centipede skeleton's long legs smashed into him. With a loud groan, he was sent flying through the air and then crashed back first through the roof of a nearly crumbled building. Tui! He coughed up blood and saw his vision turn dark for a split second. Minus 35 HP. HP, 15/50ths. Ha. Adam laughed weakly and stood up. He then opened his inventory and stuffed his mouth with food, slowly filling his health. While in the mall, he left most of his cafeteria meals half-eaten as he put the rest in his inventory for backup food in case he ended up in a fight, which was a high possibility. Coin feeders truly are weak. Adam looked at himself through the broken window shard, as if he were talking to himself. How weak! Crash! At that moment, the centipede skeleton's leg pierced through the ground outside the building. It seemed like the centipede knew that he was inside the building and wanted to finish him off. Centipede skeletons are blind, but their sense of smell is exceptional. Adam stood up and then saw the roof peeling off like faded paint and saw the centipede skeleton's hollow-looking eye sockets staring right at him. Adam, HP, 30/50ths. Sigh. Adam tightened the straps around his shield and put it in front of him as protection. Come on, you ugly fuck. At that moment, the centipede skeleton's legs shot forward at him like a harpoon and smashed straight into the shield. As the sparks flew, the impact sent Adam flying backwards while the silver shield shattered into pieces. He crashed through a wall that was already on the brink of collapse and rolled on the ground for a few meters before coming to a stop near a torn-apart couch. He then rolled to his side and stood up with wobbly legs. Then, he removed the straps of his broken shield, let it drop to the ground, and looked towards the centipede skeleton with a bloodied gaze. Adam, HP, 9/50ths. Dean, I truly respect you. Adam stood straight, looking straight at the centipede skeleton with a weary gaze. You stood your ground against a more mature adult centipede skeleton as coin feeder, and didn't show any fear. I won't let you down. Adam vowed inwardly and pointed the short sword at the skeleton creature in front of him. The centipede skeleton raised one of its 100 legs and thrust it towards Adam like a lightning bolt. Rah! Adam leaped over the skeleton leg. It missed him just a little bit and then shouted. Strong force. Strong force. It was a skill from his previous life that helped him survive many ordeals and was one of the strongest skills he owned. However, without the skill scroll and having not learned it, he couldn't use it. But, at this desperate moment, he still shouted it out for extra motivation. The centipede skeleton, who hadn't been able to see a single thing during its life, now saw a glimpse of something. It was a faded image of Adam, but a more muscular and mightier version. Its senses alerted it of something dangerous. The short sword shredded through the air and sliced through the centipede skeleton's leg. As half of the leg was cut off, the centipede skeleton let out strange humming sounds and recoiled slightly in pain before crashing into one of the buildings. And then the centipede skeleton began to slither across the ground, using its remaining legs to escape the area. It didn't care if there were buildings in the way, it simply went through it all. Adam crashed on the ground and clutched his chest in pain. Why, did it leave? He asked through a painful grunt. He felt like there was something sharp sticking to his waist. At that moment, Adam's honed senses could tell him that something was approaching. He turned to look toward the air and saw a person leaping over the buildings and landing gracefully on the rooftop. It was a figure donning silver armor with a silver serpent helmet and a large shield on the back. Hey! Ron removed his helmet and watched as the enormous centipede slither away like a frightened rabbit. The hell! As he turned back to Adam, he saw a skeleton leg, cleanly cut off by a sword, but it was still moving slightly, as if it were also trying to escape. Adam, what happened in here? Ron asked with round eyes, but he had a very clear idea but had a hard time believing it. Doesn't matter. Adam stood up while holding his waist. It's getting away. Shouldn't you go after it? Right. Ron nodded and leaped off the roof, heading in the same direction where the centipede skeleton escaped. We'll discuss this later. What a pain. Adam shook his head and limped back to the crumbled building, then picked up the broken pieces of his shield. Its durability was at 0%, and therefore it was unrecoverable. However, he still put them in his inventory and started heading back to the safe area. He didn't expect anyone to defeat the boss today, and he knew he wasn't in any shape to fight. Chapter 24, Cage Zane. Near the Black Castle, Ramon and Hannibal heard a loud rumbling as if a horde of wild animals were running through the town. When they turned around, they saw an enormous centipede skeleton mowing through the buildings like an unstoppable train and wreaking havoc everywhere it went. What the fuck is that? Ramon asked in shock. Hannibal's eyes were also wide, like saucers. Below the hill leading to the Black Castle, Donald and Nico looked at the creature with bulging eyes. With them were new players they recruited, whom they only planned to use as fodder. That can't be the boss, right? Nico asked with trembling lips. Maybe we should return to safe area. Donald suggested with a nervous chuckle. Even though it sounded like a joke, he actually meant it, but said it in a joking way because he simply wanted to see the reaction from his other group members and didn't want to be the first one to suggest it, as it may harm his prestige. His newly recruited members, who didn't participate in any of the fighting on the first floor, looked at each other with frightened looks. Boss, maybe we should prepare more. One of them suggested. Donald gazed at him and scoffed. All right, if you think so. I think I also didn't take enough food for this. Adam stepped through the door and limped towards the stairs, then took them all the way to the third floor of the mall and soon arrived back at his room. However, he saw that there was already someone awaiting him. Welcome back. Muriel stood up from the bed and bowed. Ugh. Adam plopped down on the chair and dropped his sword to the floor. So, did I fail in the quest? I honestly didn't expect F-ranked missions to be that difficult, haha. Of course, he knew this wasn't ordinary F-ranked mission difficulty. However, after the short meeting with Muriel, he realized that he might have been a little bit too obvious about his knowledge of things. He didn't want someone from the Council of Mercenaries to come scoop around and ask questions about things he didn't want to talk about. I am not sure. Muriel replied and shook her head. And you must already know after meeting with Ron that something was not right. Could it be that wasn't the baby centipede skeleton? Adam asked. I had a hunch after it managed to toss me around like a rag doll. That was adult centipede skeleton. Muriel said, staring at Adam with her dark brown eyes. That is an evolved version of baby centipede skeleton. It looked like it had been maturing under the second floor for quite some time. How unlucky of me, I guess. Adam touched his waist and groaned. What happens now? The second floor will be closed for a while. Muriel said. At least until the adult centipede skeleton is annihilated. Ron will try to isolate it while the other players return to safe area safely. We have already informed the Council of Mercenaries, and they have dispatched a guild to come and clear this mess. Adam nodded and intertwined his fingers. I'll rest for a while. Can you leave? Apologies, but I am a little bit injured. Of course. Muriel bowed respectfully, and as she opened the door to leave, she turned to Adam and said, Ron and perhaps someone from the guild that was dispatched by the Council of Mercenaries will want to have a word with you. Anything serious? Adam asked as he laid down on the bed and took a relieved sigh. No. Muriel shook her head. You actually did them a favor. If the adult centipede skeleton had matured a few more years, the consequences could have been much direr. Yet, most of the players on the floor died when the adult centipede skeleton revealed itself. It could have been much worse without Dean and the mercenaries in the safe area. Compared to this, it was a much deadlier event. After Muriel left, Adam felt his eyes turn heavier by the moment. If the words of those chaos being experts would have been correct, and it was only half-matured adult centipede skeleton, I could have killed it. I suppose I took this for granted and forgot that nothing ever works as planned for mercenaries. I need to be more careful in the future. This could have zeroed me, and my second chance would have been for naught. At this moment, darkness filled his vision as he entered a deep slumber. Time passed by, hours went by, and soon, a loud knock on the door awakened him. Ack! Adam rubbed his eyes and went to open the door. After opening the door, Ron, clad in his silver armor, stood in front of him. Adam, we'll like to have a word with you. We. Adam looked over Ron's shoulder and saw a blonde-haired man with a scar on his cheek standing behind him. He donned lighter armor than Ron, and it was fully in yellow and white. On the chest, there was a crest of a one-eyed human face with a smiley expression. He glanced at Adam with a cold, calculative gaze, his eyes narrowing as he sized him up as if he were a person who couldn't trust anything. Can we enter? Ron asked. Sure. Adam allowed them to enter and went to sit on his bed. While Ron took a seat on the chair, the blonde-haired man walked into the room and looked around the place with a narrowed gaze. This is my mercenary colleague Cage Zane. Ron introduced the blonde-haired man because he knew he wasn't the most talkative person and wouldn't have introduced himself. Oh, I thought he looked familiar. Adam scratched the back of his head and nodded at both of them. Cage Zane, member of the Luzai, Keep Smile Guild. He is a member of the Pro Strong cult. Pro Strong was an infamous cult in Mortal Online. They were fanatics who believed that strength was the core and the only way to achieve true enlightenment. They thought that all weak people were a waste of air and should be treated like slaves. They still thought that weak people had to start somewhere to become powerful. That's why they had been suggesting that all weak people should be slaves, and only until they became strong enough would they achieve their freedom. This suggestion was shut down immediately. We wanted to ask you about some questions. Ron said and crossed his legs. He kept his voice very natural and didn't sound very serious. How did you find out the adult centipede skeleton? I accepted the mission to find and destroy baby centipede skeleton. Adam began retelling the events. From the descriptions, I found out that it stays in dark, damp basements, so I went to look for one, and in the very first building, I found a suitable basement, but there was a cracked wall, and behind that, I found the centipede. Ron nodded. What happened then? It attacked me, and I quickly escaped the basement. I would have died, but I managed to stand my ground long enough for you to arrive. Humph! Cage scoffed and shook his head while looking at the silverware on the cabinet. Ron, ignoring Cage's scoff, nodded. You did well by discovering the centipede and protecting yourself. It'll be annihilated quickly. If it had matured a few more years, I think we would have needed a few more guilds to participate. What about my mission? Adam asked and took out the folded mission poster. Was my mission considered a failure? Sometimes, during missions, unexpected things happen. Ron said with his arms crossed. Sometimes, those unexpected things lead to many casualties and unfortunate things. However, sometimes the missions are diamonds hidden in a rough, and this was a perfect example of it. Ron then looked at Adam and said, You'll be rewarded for the discovery. Adam nodded with a slight smile. Ron then saw that Cage had heard enough as he turned around and walked out of the room with his cape billowing behind him. We'll have another gathering in the auditorium tomorrow and we'll invite everyone from the tutorial. Ron said. You'll receive your reward there. All right, thanks. Adam stood up and bowed. Ron nodded and left the room. After the door closed, Adam laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I forgot how it feels to be looked at in scorn. Adam chuckled as he saw Cage's gaze scanning him as if he were nothing but a speck of dust. I had killed my fair share of morons from the pro-strong cult and made myself very known to them. I think they called me the Antichrist? Ha, just because I was stronger than them. Bunch of hypocrites. In this life, I will just eradicate them. Chapter 25, Emergency Meeting. In the control room, the fight between Adam and the adult centipede skeleton played out on the big screen. In the scene where Adam sliced off the centipede's skeleton leg, a few surprised exclamations echoed throughout the room. Then, shockingly, it looked like the adult centipede skeleton ran away, but they were certain that it was because it could sense Ron nearby. What do you think? Ron asked his colleague with a neutral tone. He wasn't the most fond of Cage and his pro-strong agenda, but he knew how powerful he was, and with Lose Eye, Keep Smile Guild members here, the situation would be resolved quickly. I think that Ant was lucky that the adult centipede skeleton sensed your presence. Cage said coldly. If you were 10 seconds too late, he would be a crushed bug on the ground. That is as expected. Ron said, his eyes narrowing. However, he is only coin feeder and yet had the guts to confront the centipede by himself. That deserves some respect. Strong deserves respect. Cage said. Weak does not. He then turned around and approached the door. Let's get this over with so I can leave this place quicker. Cage sniffed the air and grimaced. It smells disgusting in here. A bunch of weaklings who can't even stand up for themselves. Ron sighed and then looked at one of the control room's operatives. Send this feed to the Council of Mercenaries. I am sure they would like to see it. Yes, sir. One of them nodded and started sending the video about the fight to the Council of Mercenaries. After a short while, an alarm rang throughout the mall, indicating that an emergency meeting was going to be held. All the players in the tutorial gathered in the safe area and swarmed inside the auditorium. The players in Adam's group had just recently returned from second floor and sat down inside the auditorium, wondering what the meeting was about. After everyone had gathered in the auditorium and most of the seats were filled, Ron and Cage appeared in front of the auditorium. Hello, everyone, Ron said. The reason for today's emergency meeting is because something happened on the second floor, and we have to address it. The players shifted their positions in the seats as it looked like it was more serious than they expected. There had been adult centipede skeleton evolving under the second floor for a few years now, and today, it was discovered by one of the players in this room. It might not sound serious to you all, but it is. It is a kind of creature that is commonly found above the 50th floor. Loud gasps came from the players. Donald and the rest paled as they remembered the sight of the hideous centipede running through the buildings. However, they were also relieved that the creature wasn't the boss. The players that had already reached the third and fourth floors raised their eyebrows, wondering what that had to do with them. The adult centipede skeleton is far too strong for floors this low. Ron continued. It's not fully matured and isn't anywhere as strong as fully matured, which can be found beyond the 50th floor, but still, it's powerful enough to disrupt the hierarchy of the floors this low. It should be powerful enough to cross floors and reach the third, maybe even fourth floor by simply crashing through the wall of dimensions that separates the floors. The wall of dimensions is so pathetically weak in these early floors, but it's enough to keep these weaker chaos beings locked in their floors, but not enough to keep the adult centipede skeleton on the second floor. That's why all floors below the 5th are closed for now. They'll be reopened tomorrow after we get rid of it. Most of the players didn't mind, as it meant there was one free day of rest. However, the ones on the 4th floor were somewhat annoyed by it because the end of the tutorial was so close, and they had already been 3 weeks inside the tutorial. They wanted to get it over with. Now then. Ron cleared his throat. At that moment, Cage rolled his eyes and left the auditorium, as he didn't want to take part in this second part. Ignoring that, Ron looked to the back row, where a black-haired player sat. We also decided to reward the player who discovered the adult centipede skeleton. If the centipede had been allowed to mature longer, the situation could have ended with a lot of casualties. The players from Adam's group looked around, wondering who was the one who discovered it. At that moment, Ron said, "The rewards are 10,000 points for the final score and 100 shine coins. Player Adam, please come here." Arg! Donald groaned and watched as Adam stood up and slowly walked down the stairs. Oh, of course it was this bastard. Ramon narrowed his eyes dangerously. Seth's expression looked complicated, and he focused his gaze on the steel short sword dangling from Adam's hip. He clenched his hands into a tight fist. The players from other groups watched as Adam approached Ron. They were surprised about the reward, as 10,000 points were equal to completing a D-ranked mission, and 100 shine coins was a significant amount of money. Here. Ron handed Adam the brown pouch containing shine coins and said, "If it weren't for your identity as coin feeder, the reward would have been much higher, but the council thought that this should be more than enough for someone in tutorial." "I understand." Adam nodded and made the shine coins enter his interface. He was then about to return, but then Ron stopped him. "Also, here." Ron took out a round shield from his inventory and handed it over to Adam. "Yours broke, right? This is an old shield of mine, and I don't have any use for it." Adam looked surprised but also conflicted about whether he should accept it. Of course, he wouldn't mind free weapons, but this could have hidden intentions behind it. Seeing that look, Ron shook his head. "I ain't trying to force you to join Crescent Serpents if you are afraid of that. This is my reward to you." Adam nodded and accepted the shield. It looked slightly higher quality than his previous one. After Adam returned to his seat, Ron looked at everyone and said, "For today, you all can have one meal in the restaurant, free of charge." Many eyes brightened up as some of them had already had the pleasure of tasting the food in there, and it was 100 times better than in the cafeteria but also more expensive. Now that it was free of charge, many salivated just at the thought. After that, the emergency meeting ended, and Adam was the first one to leave the auditorium. 10,000 points. I wanted a little bit more, but it's good enough. Adam sighed with a slight relief and looked at his interface with 100 shine coins. He never had this many shine coins during his tutorial days in his previous life. Back then, it was a struggle to earn even a single shine coin. This is still not enough for skill scroll, and I don't need any weapons. I should just save them, and perhaps, at the end of the tutorial, I might be able to acquire one skill scroll. Chapter 26, Adam vs. Ramon. The following day, while most of the players were sleepily having their dinner in the cafeteria, Adam moved around the spinning training dummies in the training room. The training dummies were made of thick wood, and they were holding wooden swords while spinning around as if they were in a dance. Adam, using the new round shield, blocked the wooden swords and smashed the short sword at one of the spinning training dummies. Bang, bang, bang! The sound of a sword smacking against wood echoed across the training room. Whew! With sweat dripping down his face, he used dizzying footwork, dodging several wooden swords at the same time and then counter-attacking with the steel sword, which left a mark on the torsos of the training dummies. "Why do you bother training?" At this moment, a morbid voice came from the door. Adam backstepped, dodging the rest of the spinning swords, and then grabbed a towel from his inventory, cleaning his sweat while turning to look at the door. Ramon leaned against the doorway, looking with a smirk at Adam. "Why do I bother training?" Adam repeated the question and laughed while wiping the sweat off his forehead. "I don't mind giving you some advice." "Ha, why would I need advice from a pissant like you?" Ramon laughed and turned around in an attempt to leave. Did you know training in the game actually has an effect on your real body? Adam asked with a smile. Hey! Ramon frowned and turned back to Adam. You mean, training here is the same as training in the real world? What nonsense are you spouting? It is true. Adam said and tossed the towel back into the inventory. Our bodies are currently in hibernation state, stopping us from starving to death. When we eat or sleep in here, our real body also gets nutrition and sleep at the same time. Same with the training. It has a bigger effect if you have gold or diamond VR pod, but it still works even with bronze VR pod. Do you know how that works? Ramon shook his head. No one does, Adam chuckled. Have you ever wondered who created this game? Ramon frowned. No, and why would I care? No one knows who created this game. Adam smiled. That's why there is a big conspiracy that this game was actually created by the government to mind control people, or, well, keep all the people who are prone to violence in here. Ramon's expression turned thoughtful, as that sounded like a good possibility, as he, himself, would have been sent to asylum but was instead put here as an experiment. However, the company that creates the VR pods, never added something that would allow the users to affect their real bodies in the virtual world, so it's something about this game that makes it happen. It's truly fascinating, ain't it? Adam chuckled. And improving the physique is one reason for my training, but there are also other reasons. When we level up, our stamina, agility, and stamina increase, that's true, but it doesn't magically improve our swordsmanship or ability to wield any weapons. You cannot learn any of the skills if you don't know how to use the weapon. You can learn the weakest skills with just a basic understanding of your weapon, but not any of the stronger skills. When you leave this tutorial and join guild, they will immediately put you into training course that might last few months to half a year. You'll be forced to learn until you know how to use the weapon, even with your eyes closed. Oh! Ramon scoffed, pulled out his machete, and examined Adam with a critical eye. I have been living in the streets for my whole life, and I haven't learned how to fight. I have learned how to kill my opponent, and that is the only thing that matters. You think you're better than me just because you've trained more? Foolishness. Adam put his shield in front of his body and pointed the sword at Ramon. Are you an orphan of the plague? Yet. Ramon went into a low fighting stance, looking like a wild animal ready to pounce. That's why I have lived a harsher life than you fucker could ever think about it. Looking at you, you must have been born with a silver spoon stuck in your ass, having a worry-free childhood, and you needed a hobby when living in that small mansion of yours became boring, so you picked up martial arts. Nope. Adam shook his head and slowly approached Ramon, ready to use the shield to block any attack thrown at him. I am also an orphan of the plague. Ramon's eyes flashed with surprise before he again scoffed. You must have got a good family. I could have gotten worse. Adam shrugged his shoulders. Well, I drew the shortest straw possible. Ramon's grip on the machete tightened. The family I got was horrible. I could only last them a few months before I just ran off and instead lived in the streets. With that suffering, I became powerful. We'll see. Adam said and dashed forth, stabbing his sword forward towards Ramon. Rah! Ramon deflected the sword with a sloppy slash of his machete and then pounced at Adam like a wild animal and threw a kick. Bang! Adam blocked the kick with the shield and held his ground even though his feet wanted to slide backwards. Ramon used the shield like a springboard and jumped up, landing behind Adam. He quickly turned around and slashed his machete towards the exposed neck. However, at that moment, Adam quickly spun around and deflected the machete with his shield, then stabbed the sword deep into Ramon's waist. The blood spewed out of Ramon's body, splattering across Adam's face and chest. Ha! Ramon grabbed Adam's sword-wielding hand and spat blood towards his face. Adam quickly bent his knees, dodging the blood, and then swung his shield upward, smashing it at Ramon's chin. Ramon's head snapped back, and he stumbled backward, the sword slipping out of his waist. The sudden blow to his chin left him dazed, and he slowly fell to the ground. A holograph appeared above Ramon's head. Ramon, HP, 11/50. You have great fighting instincts, but you don't know how to defend. Adam slowly sheathed his sword and wiped the blood off his face. You can't just risk getting hit and then hope your counterattack is good enough to kill your opponent. Arg! Ramon held his chin and stood up with his face red in anger. He only glared at Adam and then stormed out of the training room. This is why you'll need training. Adam shrugged his shoulders and was also about to leave the training room, but then saw Muriel appearing at the doorway, writing something on her notepad. Did you enjoy the show? Adam asked as he approached her. Yes, I did. Muriel answered with a rather serious tone and then said, the second floor is open, the adult centipede skeleton has been dealt with. Oh, that was quick. Adam nodded. I'll suppose I'll go there then. Good luck. Muriel said, put her notepad away, and then walked away with her heels clicking on the floor. At that moment, Adam heard sounds coming from the first floor of the mall. As he looked out of the door, he saw that the first floor of the tutorial store shone, and another group of players arrived at the safe area. They all looked exhausted and injured, as if they had been suffering some big setbacks. The number of players was also fewer than Adam's group. They must have had quite a hard time with the boss. Adam thought and then looked towards the second floor's door. The players of his group were already swarming through, most already having a destination: the Black Castle. Chapter 27, The Second Floor. As Adam appeared in the abandoned town, he saw Donald and everyone else staring out towards the valley in the distance. It was around 2 kilometers away from the town, but they could clearly see something there. Adam silently looked at the corpse of the adult skeleton centipede that was lying on top of the small valley hill. It had most of the important parts removed because they sell for a lot of money. The mission reward was not the only way to earn shine coin during the mission. It was also possible to earn some by harvesting the creature's body parts that were important. The adult centipede skeleton had important bones that could be made into powerful weapons and artifacts. Therefore, the Lose Eye, Keep Smile Guild harvested everything and left behind the useless corpse as a reminder of the true horrors that awaited in the deeper dungeon. How did they defeat that? Donald whispered in shock. However, after remembering what he said, he coughed awkwardly and looked at his new group of players, whom he managed to recruit. It's just a big centipede, ain't it, right? They nodded awkwardly, but when they looked at the enormous corpse, they could never imagine fighting something that huge, and they knew that there were even more dangerous creatures outside the tutorial. Cough, let's go to the Black Castle. Donald shouted to them, and they then began running down the dark and winding path. Other players who had finished admiring the centipede skeleton's corpse soon followed them. I don't want others to realize the things I know because they might come to ask questions. Adam looked away from the skeleton centipede and followed after the group of players. At the end of the tutorial, the players have to write down their name on a contract that forbids them from revealing any information about the tutorial. However, that contract doesn't apply to the players who died before completing the tutorial. Still, if someone is suspicious of my knowledge, they might deduce some of my points. And the members of the Council of Mercenaries are very suspicious individuals. So, let's take this more slowly and make sure that I don't look like someone with excess knowledge. After a walk down the dark, winding path, they arrived at the gates of the Black Castle. Adam walked behind others while they surveyed the dark castle interior with weapons in hand. Hey, you're Adam, right? A voice, followed by the heavy scent of female perfume, came right beside him. Adam side-glanced at a smiling young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and pearly white teeth. She looked rather lovely, with brown eyes and a bright smile. Perfume. She purchased perfume with her shine coin in the safe area. It means she cares about her looks a great deal. Adam's eyes narrowed. She must be trying to impress others, and it seems to have worked. She was with 3 young men, who looked like they had just graduated from high school and were glaring at him with great intensity. "My name is Catalina. Nice to meet you." Catalina offered her soft-looking hand, which looked like she had taken good care of her skin routine. Adam looked at the hand silently. Not a single wear on her hand, and it looks like she hadn't even touched a weapon yet. She must have gotten shine coin from someone else to purchase her precious perfume. It means she is nothing but a leech. Adam ignored the handshake and walked past her with an emotionless gaze. "Ah!" Catalina blinked in surprise and looked at her hand, which was left hanging alone. "What an arrogant fellow!" a young man behind him said with an angry glare. "Just because he managed to kill the first boss and accidentally found the centipede skeleton, humph. He might just be antisocial, who knows?" Catalina smiled gently, but inside her mind, she had different thoughts. These fucking nerds. They probably never even leave their basement to touch some grass, yet he dares to ignore me. Ugh, so humiliating. Now, where the fuck is the boss? Ramon looked across the castle's yard with a narrowed gaze, but then saw Adam walk right past him and enter the castle without a second thought. Ramon narrowed his eyes and followed right behind. "Yo, Ramon, where the hell are you going?" Hannibal quickly followed after him, barely being able to keep up. "I doubt the fucking boss is outside." Ramon snapped back and pointed at the castle's interior. "It's somewhere inside. I know it." After stepping through the entrance, Adam looked high towards the ceiling and saw many stairs leading up to the top, crisscrossing between each other. "This time, I'll get the kill." Ramon appeared beside him and said venomously. "Do you even know where it is?" Adam looked at him and smirked. "It took the last group a few days to find it. I'll tear through the walls and peel off the paint if I need to." Ramon snarled, his eyes blazing with determination. "I ain't losing to you." "Good luck, then." Adam crossed his arms and closed his eyes, but then he heard a gentle clicking of the watch. His eyes immediately opened, and he turned towards a bookshelf tucked away in the corner. While Ramon and every other player started running up the stairs to other floors in search for the boss, Adam approached the bookshelf and found a small pocket watch hidden among the books. "It's currently 6 in the evening." Adam closed the pocket watch and tucked it away in his chest pocket. He then slipped his hands inside his pocket and ran up the stairs, following other players into the search for the boss. In the safe area's control room, the hundreds of holographic cameras showed every part of the castle in high detail. They watched as the players ran down the hallways, searching every room from top to bottom, and after a few hours, they still hadn't found anything. Muriel sat in the faraway corner, away from other handlers who were also looking at how their players were doing. "What are you doing now, Adam?" Muriel tapped her pen against her lips while watching Adam survey the paintings in the hallway, as if he were just sightseeing and not in any hurry. "Donald and others have already started working together to find any hidden rooms in the castle, and that will net them some extra points within the Council of Mercenaries. You and a few others who are working alone will be negatively affected. Every single second in the tutorial is important for the ending result." "What are you planning, Adam?" "For others to find the boss so you can kill it. Even if you are the one that kills the boss, you might still not get the highest amount of points among the players. You have to do something that truly shows that you were the key person for completing the floor. Otherwise, your points will continue to be deduced." "How much is the time?" a person managing the control room asked. A short-haired woman took out a pocket watch and glanced at it briefly. 20:05, approximately. She replied and tucked away her pocket watch. "A little bit less than 4 hours." The man whispered and nodded. "If you need to eat or rest, now's the time. When the promised time is near, there won't be any rest." Chapter 28, Clown Boy. Yaon. Ramon yawned loudly while leaning against the railing of the 6th floor of the castle. When he leaned over the railing, he could see all the floors of the castle, including the front lounge. He could also see players moving along the stairs, moving between floors in search of the boss. "It's nowhere," Hannibal said in frustration and leaned against the same railing. "We have searched everywhere." Ramon caressed his chin thoughtfully, his gaze narrowing as he saw a certain person sitting on a couch in the front lounge. "Like he said, it took the last group a few days to find the boss." "Your meaning is?" Hannibal raised his eyebrow. "I don't think the boss is simply hiding." Ramon crossed his arms. "I heard that Donald was suggesting that the Black Castle was a decoy and the boss was actually somewhere else," Hannibal said. "It could be true, and maybe the last group realized that after a few days of searching." "Perhaps so," Ramon said and tapped his finger against the railing. "However, I am sure he would have thought about that, yet he is still sitting here." "Who?" Hannibal frowned. Ramon pointed towards the lounge. Hannibal leaned over the railing, gazing 6 floors down to the lounge. There, he saw the black-haired young man sitting with his legs crossed on the couch. "Him?" Hannibal looked at Ramon with a frown. "Why do you care about him?" "Because he is the most competent one out of these fools," Ramon replied with a scoff. "You don't see it, do you?" "See what?" Hannibal asked. "Back in the streets, I had to adapt to survive. I learned to pick my fights, and I stole from the weak while avoiding the strong. I thought we were the apex predators when we arrived at that cottage. No one seemed threatening, especially not Donald, even though I can see his cunning nature from a mile away. This guy, Adam, he's the only one I couldn't get a proper reading of. I couldn't tell whether he was weak or strong, whether he was a leader or a follower." "Well, he is strong, we saw that already," Hannibal said. "He killed Parrish and fended off our attacks. He is a formidable opponent, sure, but he doesn't radiate the aura of being invincible. I think we can take him down." "I don't know." Ramon clicked his tongue. "He frustrates me greatly. I want to see his limit. I want to see where his breaking point is." On the bottom floor, Adam opened the pocket watch, saw the clock hand ticking, and nodded slightly. "Time is nigh." Adam tucked away the pocket watch and took out a napkin from his pocket, then used it to wipe his fingers clean before putting it back into his pocket. He then turned to face the center of the room, which looked empty. There was nothing on the floor or in the air. The only thing that filled the space was the silence and the echoing sound of players' footsteps. "Let's put my best acting face." Adam stood up and dusted off his trousers. "What Muriel said is true. I might still get points deducted by the council if I look like a lone wolf. Lone wolves are not needed in any guilds. So, I'll put just a small act on this floor alone. It should show enough of what I can accomplish with competent members on my back. Those stubborn members of the council are always so bothersome." Adam then approached the door and walked out of the castle into the yard, inhaling the fresh air. "Yawn." Adam let out a long yawn, stretching his arms and taking a deep breath. It looked like he was ready to go back to the safe area for a good night's rest. Several hidden cameras caught that, and a buzz happened in the control room. "He is the first one to leave." Several handlers said in surprise that they didn't expect the player with the highest total points to be the first to give up. Especially when it was 10 minutes before midnight, which was the promised time. Muriel's eyes shook. "No, go back. What are you doing? You are ruining your tutorial if you are the first person to give up." She pleaded inside her mind, her eyes trembling with worry. In the yard of the Black Castle, Adam opened the pocket watch in his hand, closed it, and opened it again. It let out a click sound every time he closed and opened. The council wants mercenaries that also have a brain inside their heads and not all muscle. I brute forced through the first floor, now it's time to show them that I am more than that. Adam turned around and looked up at the Black Castle. The wall had faded engravings of a clock with its black clock hands stuck in a single spot as if time had frozen. The clock was nothing but a faded painting, but it showed the time of midnight. Adam lowered his gaze and looked at the pocket watch. The clock hand ticked, nearing midnight. His lips curled slightly into a small smile, and the cameras captured it. He had found the pocket watch. The man in charge exclaimed. How come none of you caught that? His workers looked embarrassed as there were over 100 cameras, and at one point in time, they must have missed it. Muriel stood up in surprise, and when she saw the smile, her heart started racing. Did he really find out the truth behind the boss? Muriel gulped. That quickly too. She couldn't believe it, but she still kept her emotions in check and decided to wait till midnight to see how it would play out. In the Black Castle, Adam stepped through the entrance and looked at the center of the lounge. He looked at the pocket watch, leaned against the wall, and waited patiently. Several players yawned and departed from the castle, planning to return to the safe area to have a proper night's sleep as they didn't expect anyone to find the boss tonight. When the control room saw that, they shook their heads, as it was only a few minutes before the time. Adam didn't stop the players or tell them that it would be a huge mistake. Instead, he kept his eyes peeled on the pocket watch. 1 minute. 45 seconds. 30 seconds. 15 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Click. As soon as the time hit midnight, Adam closed the pocket watch with a gentle click and pocketed it. He. Childish laughter reverberated across the castle. It stopped every player in their tracks, and they all turned their heads in the same direction towards the front lounge. Do you want to play a game? Without any warning, a figure appeared in the air in the front lounge, floating about a meter from the ground. He had the appearance of a child in his early teens, with a bright smile on his face. He had a colorful, whimsical appearance with baggy clothing that had patterns of polka dots and stripes. On his face, he had white face makeup covering his face with a painted-on smile and red cheeks, as if there were red paint splattered on them. He wore a bright yellow hat with a large, fluffy brim that was adorned with colorful feathers. It looked like he was just a child, trying to copy the appearance of a party clown, but it just made him look laughable and cute. Above his head, a floating name bar appeared. Clown Boy, HP, 10/10. Clown Boy, also known as Child Chaos Being. Adam drew his steel short sword and picked up his round shield. It takes on the appearance of a human child, with a whimsical appearance that makes it look harmless. Yet it is a chaos being through and through. The biggest mistake when facing Clown Boy is to underestimate it. It will eat your head the instant you let it. However, fighting is not the hardest part on this floor. The time limit is. Clown Boy only appears for 1 minute after midnight. Then it again disappears for the rest of the day. That's why one has to kill it in that 1 minute. Chapter 29, The Scene in Cafeteria. It's the boss. Donald shouted and ran down the stairs like a possessed demon. The kill is mine. Shit. Ramon and Hannibal quickly began descending down the stairs, but since they were at the top, they were furthest from the boss. It's a child. Catalina said with surprise while walking down the stairs at a rather calm pace. She didn't look like she was in any hurry because the men in her group had already reached the bottom. After seeing the health of the boss, many players felt their greed shoot up, as with a single attack, they could kill the boss and shoot straight to the top of the total point score. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The kill is mine. But then, Donald pushed past the players and lunged at the floating child with his sword. He didn't care that the chaos being looked like a child. Oh, you want to play? Clown Boy showed a bright smile, and his eyes gleamed with excitement. He then pointed his finger at Donald, his fingernail painted red. Then let's play a game of tag. If I touch you, I win. As the finger neared Donald's forehead, he swung his sword at Clown Boy's neck and expected it to kill him. However, when the broadsword finished its swing, Clown Boy vanished from the scene, leaving behind empty air. Where? Donald's eyes widened in shock as he saw his sword hitting empty air. I caught you at that moment, a voice came behind him, and a finger touched the back of his head. Clown Boy floated behind Donald, touching his head with his finger. You've lost. Clown Boy said with a childish voice, but then his teeth started growing. A winner gets the loser's dinner. When he opened his mouth wide open with his razor-sharp teeth, his skin started to tear near his mouth, and suddenly his mouth looked massive, as if he could eat a whole elephant in one bite. The players exclaimed in shock and shuddered in disgust. This child was not a child but instead a terrifying creature. As Clown Boy prepared to take a bite out of Donald's head, a figure with a shield rammed straight into the side of Donald, sending him flying away from Clown Boy's clutches and saving him. Ouch! Donald rolled down on the ground, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the person who saved him. It was none other than Adam. Why? You stole my food! Clown Boy's mouth closed, and he smiled sadly. That was not nice. Yeah, whatever. Adam swung his sword towards Clown Boy's head, but the strange child-looking creature vanished like a fart in the wind and appeared on the 6th floor, floating near the ceiling. You cheated! Clown Boy shouted. See you tomorrow, cheater! At that moment, Clown Boy vanished from existence, and silence returned in the castle. Where did it go? Players murmured between each other. Adam slowly sheathed his sword and stored his shield in his inventory. He then shook his head, checked the pocket watch, and saw that it was 1 minute past midnight. He didn't say a single word and walked out of the castle, heading back to safe area with an atmosphere of silence surrounding him. It was still silent inside the Black Castle, and all the players were confused about what had just happened. You all right? Nico helped Donald stand up. Scary stuff, You know what happened? No. Donald shook his head and held his head. I am a little tired, I think I am going to return to safe area to sleep. What if it returns? Nico asked. I am too tired. Donald waved his hand lazily and left the castle with many thoughts filling his mind. A few players still remained in the castle. However, most of the players left for safe area to have a proper night's rest. In the control room, the man in charge nodded thoughtfully. They didn't manage to defeat it, as expected. It's really hard without proper teamwork. He said out loud. Still, that guy managed to find out the truth about the floor's test. Write it down, the council might want to know about it. Do you think someone told him? A shoulder-length haired woman asked. No, he seemed to have figured it out by himself. The man said, also, I don't remember anyone in the past few years finding it out. Players often just discover Clown Boy after midnight, and then when the pattern repeats, they realize what time the Clown Boy usually appears. In the far corner, Muriel hugged her notepad against her chest and left the control room with a smile on her face. After arriving at his room, Adam went to take a long, hot shower to wash away the tension and stress of the day. After that, he only put his briefs on and laid down on the bed. He closed his eyes and let out a deep sigh, feeling the weight of his exhaustion lift off his shoulders. I hope I was convincing enough. Adam put his arms under his head and let out a short yawn. I could have killed Clown Boy, but that is not impressive. That will just give a reaction. Tomorrow, I'll have to convince them. That won't be easy, as I am not really liked here, and everyone wants to have the kill. Still, as long as half of them are with me, I'll consider it a success. Before that, I'll have to do something else. The following morning. In the cafeteria, the players from Adam's group had gathered to eat breakfast. Most of them planned to finish it early and go straight to the Black Castle. As Donald moved his spoon mindlessly in the soup, he heard footsteps come from the entrance and saw the black-haired Adam enter the cafeteria alone. He wanted to call him out, but then he saw Adam walking past them and approaching another group in the corner of the cafeteria. They occupied the biggest table in the cafeteria as if they were like kings. They had been the longest in the tutorial compared to others and had already reached the 3rd floor. They were extremely close to completing the tutorial, and in a day or two, they might succeed. Donald frowned, and a few other players also watched as Adam approached them with a frown. After Adam stopped beside the table, the players around the table frowned and angrily asked, "What do you want, newbie?" They acted arrogantly, as if they were seniors and had the right to bully the newcomers. "Mind sharing the information about Clown Boy?" Adam asked with a smile. "Ha!" A brown-haired player laughed loudly and looked at his friends, who also snickered mockingly. "Sure, but the information costs 100 shine coin. You thought you could get the information for free? Haha." Another player laughed. "In a tutorial, knowledge is money, and knowledge is not free. We are fine with your sword too." A player saw the steel short sword dangling from Adam's hip and licked his lips greedily. "That and 50 shine coins, then the information is yours." Ramon and Hannibal stopped eating their food and looked at the scene with frowns on their faces. It was silence in the cafeteria. The players from Adam's group watched in silence, slightly frustrated by the arrogance of those players. They had been only a few days longer than them in the tutorial, yet they acted like they had been in Mortal Online for years more. They started to get the taste of the hierarchy of Mortal Online. It was seeped deep into the bones of the players. Those players who now acted arrogantly were also once the newest group, and the older groups acted arrogantly towards them. Now that they were the oldest group, they wanted to feel superiority, and it made them feel important. "Oh, quite expensive." Adam smiled. "However, I was not asking. I was demanding." "Hey!" The brown-haired player frowned, but before he could speak another word, Adam grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the wall. "What the hell?" A haughty-looking player jumped up from the table, wanting to help his friend, but then felt a cold blade on his neck. Adam held the steel short sword near the haughty-looking player's throat while simultaneously squeezing the brown-haired player's throat. "Why you'll get punished for this?" the brown-haired player screamed. "Help, he is attacking me. Punish him." However, his shout reached empty ears as there weren't Ron or any mercenaries nearby. It was still early in the morning, and they were often doing their own stuff this early before their shift started. "Tell the weakness of Clown Boy," Adam said. "Also, say it loud enough for my friends to hear." "Friends?" Ramon frowned and looked at others with equally confused looks. "Since when the fuck were we his friends? Did he hit his head when he slept or what?" Fine!" the brown-haired player screamed. He thought he was able to easily overpower someone from other groups as he had already experienced 3 floors, but when he looked into Adam's eyes, he had bad premonition. "Good." Adam smiled. "You have 1 minute. If I even suspect you of lying, I'll shove the sword down your throat. Trust me, it won't taste nice." Chapter 30, I have a plan. Nick, the brown-haired player, looked at the player in front of him with shakiness in his eyes. His confidence and pride as an older player crumbled to pieces. While he and his friends around the table were more experienced players, around 2 weeks older, they were still level 0 and in the same rank as everyone else coin feeders. Connie, his friend, felt the cold blade against his neck and gulped dryly. He moved his eyes around, trying to see what his friends were doing behind his back and if they were planning to help, but they were all sitting calmly, watching the scene unfold. "Well?" Adam raised an eyebrow and squeezed Nick's throat tighter. "NGH." After feeling the difficulty of breathing, Nick gasped and nodded as well as he could. "See Clown Boy appears." "Louder!" Adam shouted right into his ear. "Clown Boy appears right after midnight." Ramon, Donald, and everyone else at their table felt their eyes widen, and they then conversed between each other, trying to remember when the Clown Boy appeared last time. They came to the conclusion that it must have appeared around midnight, therefore, the information seemed correct. "Now, how can we defeat it?" Adam asked in a calm yet powerful voice. "NGH, you have to beat it in its game. Nick shouted out. Once you beat it, it will start crying, and since its health is low, one hit is enough to kill it. Otherwise, killing it is much harder since it is so fast. Is there anything else? Adam asked with a frown. And no. Nick shook his head, but his lips had turned dry, and he couldn't stop the trembling in his hands. Adam removed the cold blade from Connie's neck and placed it against Nick's abdomen, around where his belly button was. What are you doing? Nick asked while his face changed shades from bright red to pale white. Did he catch my lie? There is no way. Last time, the clown boy disappeared quite soon, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Nick's heart almost dropped to the bottom of his stomach. He was gambling with the truth, hoping that Adam and no one on his side were able to figure that out. After all, from his knowledge, this group shouldn't have visited the second floor that often. Alright, I forgot something. Nick shouted, realizing that speaking the truth was the only choice. Donald watched everything happen and chimed to his friends, there is something else? Could it be that there is a time limit? The clown boy disappears after 1 minute of its appearance. Nick shouted for everyone to hear. 1 minute. Donald and the rest looked sour-faced, as that was not a lot of time. However, if they only needed one strike to end it, it should be enough. Thank you. Adam slowly sheathed his weapon and, with a smile on his face, turned his back to Nick and started walking towards Donald and others. Nick gritted his teeth and rubbed his bruised neck, feeling defeated and humiliated. Guys, follow my lead. Nick said to Connie and everyone else in their group. They all nodded and stood up from the table. You bastard! Adam, after hearing the enraged shout, came to a stop and looked over his shoulder at the red-faced Nick and his friends. They were all wielding various weapons. In terms of experience and numbers, Nick's group was advantageous. A few of them had even bought their first ever skill scrolls, but so far, they hadn't been able to learn them. Those skills were the lowest ranked, but against those without any skills, it was an incredible advantage. A fight, hat. Ramon and Hannibal stood up with grins on their faces. They didn't like Adam, but they weren't planning to fight to help him. Instead, they wanted to fight because it seemed fun and exciting. Donald and everyone else around the table hesitantly stood up from their chairs. They didn't really want to fight, as they weren't confident enough in winning. However, since Donald stood up, they simply followed his lead. He, on the other hand, felt like he needed to repay Adam by saving his life on the second floor and now sharing very important information with them. Adam could have just kept the information to himself and gotten a free boss kill, but for some reason, he wanted them to know as well. Anyway, Donald was feeling grateful. Adam looked at them briefly, and instead of unsheathing his weapon, he simply smiled and took a seat around the table. He didn't look like he was planning to participate in the fight. What are you doing? Ramon asked with a frown. Feeling tired or what? There won't be any fighting, Adam said. Please, sit down. Hey? Ramon asked, confused. At that moment, as Nick was about to launch his attack out of fury, a loud cough sounded from the entrance of the cafeteria. What is happening in here? After turning their heads around, they all saw Ron standing at the entrance of the cafeteria with his hands behind his back. He didn't look too pleased. Nick's face paled, and he quickly pointed in Adam's direction. That bastard attacked us. Ron raised an eyebrow and looked in Adam's direction, who was scratching his cheek and looking in their direction with a confused expression. I was called here as there was apparently a disturbance in the cafeteria. Ron thought nonchalantly. It seems that Adam is using the fact that we aren't around in the mornings to cause some disturbance. Oh well, as long as no one was killed, I don't care. Sheath your weapons. Ron instructed as he walked over to the end of the cafeteria to get some food to get the day started. That's all? Nick asked in shock. He should be punished. After Ron took a tray from the stack and started loading it with breakfast items, he replied calmly, "No one was killed, I don't care." What? Nick cried out in disbelief. Ron finished loading up the tray and walked out of the cafeteria, leaving a stunned group of players behind. With frustration visible on their faces, Nick and the rest sheathed their weapons and sat down in anger. They started whispering something while throwing hostile gazes in Adam's direction. Even though Adam had his back turned, his lips curled into a knowing smirk as if some kind of plan was finally coming together. "That's right. Make your plans and come after me." Ron actually let that slide. A player chimed in from the table, surprised. "You knew that would happen, didn't you?" Ramon asked as he eyed Adam's obvious smile. "Perhaps," Adam said coyly. "Why did you share the information with us?" Donald asked. It was a question that most of the players had in their minds. At the corner of the table, Seth ate his breakfast silently but was secretly listening to every word that was said. He was still quite pissed about losing his sword, but he couldn't help but be impressed by Adam's guts. "I have a plan," Adam said.